Honestly, another thing I'd recommend getting a co-founder, and then I'd recommend having, kind of the top 5 conversations about how you see yourselves running it, how you see your lives. We didn't do that at all. I think the beauty of the situation is that we both kind of came to those conclusions without realizing it. We didn't even know that was a conversation you should have because we knew nothing about business whatsoever. We'd never done any research, read any entrepreneurship blogs in our lives.
This is the Anthology Career Stories podcast. This show is sponsored by Anthology, the web's leading confidential job matchmaking platform. More on the web at anthology.co, on Twitter at Anthology, and on the Anthology iPhone app.
Well, I'm super excited to have Keeley, Tillotson, and Peter Koehler on the interview and on the show today. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This is going to be a little bit of an experimental episode since I've not interviewed 2 guests in the same show. So I thought what we could do is we could do maybe 10 or 15 minutes with Keeley, just kind of going over your high-level career journey so people kind of get to know you. And then we do the same thing with Peter, and then the last, call it 30 minutes, we just talk about some topics that are of interest to all 3 of us that kind of came up in the earlier parts of the interview. Sound cool?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Now, you guys are joining us from Portland, Oregon. Is that right?
You got it.
Yes.
You got it.
Okay, great. And so, Keeley, what is that where your story began? Are you a native of Portland?
Yeah, I was going to say, it depends what you mean by my story. Kind of my career story did, because I moved to Portland right before high school, and prior to that, obviously, didn't have much of a career. But I grew up in a bunch of different places. My family moved a lot, but mostly in Seattle and Portland. So I've been in Portland since high school, went to Eugene, Oregon for college, and now I'm back in Portland. So Oregonian for sure.
Yeah. Now, when you decided to go to college, were you focused mainly on the Northwest, or was it just sort of it happened to be that you ended up in Eugene? How did you sort of make that decision?
Yeah, not at all, actually. I had lots of big dreams of, I want to go to, one of my dream college was Williams on the East Coast, which is in Massachusetts. And I toured a bunch of other kind of small liberal arts schools because I wanted to focus on writing or journalism. I wasn't really sure. And ultimately ended up getting a full scholarship to University of Oregon, which compared to my, potential $50,000 a year tuition to some of the other smaller schools I got into, just ultimately the pragmatic side of me got the better of me, and I headed off to Oregon.
You could probably have fit all of Williams into one of your dorms in Oregon, I bet.
Yeah, it's really true. It's a complete opposite experience, for better or for worse.
Did you by any chance manage to check out any schools in Maine?
No, I didn't go all the way up to Maine. The furthest I made it up the East Coast was Middlebury in Vermont.
Okay. Well, I'm a Bowdoin alum, so I was curious if you did the trip up to Brunswick. So what was that like at Oregon? Like, what was the sort of college experience like? Did you go into the writing and literature and pursue that full speed?
Well, I decided to, again, the pragmatic side of me getting the better of me, I decided to do a journalism focus. And I started that. I only went to college for 2 years before my college roommate and I started our business. But I was going down the journalism track with a focus on advertising because I never felt like I could kind of outshine some of the more, liberal arts focused writers, just because I always had that little itch in the back of my mind that wanted to do something maybe a little more business focused. I guess I didn't recognize that at the time, but I never felt really driven to focus 100% on kind of a full liberal arts education. I always wanted to kind of have a career focus.
So how did you, when did that light bulb go off to actually try and start a business versus just sort of thinking about business?
Totally by accident. And I wasn't necessarily thinking about starting a business. I think I always thought about myself as a solo person, so thinking about myself as a journalist or as an advertising executive, kind of as my own career path, not starting my own thing. And then my college roommate, which is definitely the best thing that came out of the college experience, was that I lived with my freshman year roommate, Erica, freshman year and sophomore year. And then at the end of sophomore year, we were just making our own peanut butter in our college apartment for the first time ever, just making it in her food processor, brought it to friends' apartments. We were making all kinds of different flavors. This is just, the product of one rainy afternoon bored at college. And, just thought it would be fun to make a label and make a website and make a Facebook profile. And then the school paper called us and wanted to profile our new company on the front page. And we weren't even fully aware at that point that we had a company,
right.
But it just kind of fell into our laps that way. And neither of us were super, worried about our schoolwork because we were both majoring in, somewhat easy majors at a big university. So we were like, well, we have all the spare time on our hands. We might as well just see where this goes.
How does one decide to make peanut butter just randomly? That's never occurred to me. What was there a problem that you encountered with whatever the Jiffy or whatever was around?
That might be the missing hole in my story. So we were both college athletes. She rode crew and I was on the triathlon team, and we were both vegetarians at the time. So we just ate a ton of peanut butter, and we had eaten, our whole jar of Skippy and finished it that morning. And, we're like, well, we still want to, keep eating the snack that we were eating, which was, celery and peanut butter, kind of a classic. And, we had a ton of peanuts, and she had just gotten a food processor because she was a very avid cook.
Uh-huh.
And we were like, there's something in this equation, could probably make us some peanut butter. So we just Googled it and started blending it, and we just thought it was such a miracle.
Does it taste a lot different than what you had in the Skippy?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We were like, wow, it actually tastes like peanuts. And that was a reaction we got from a lot of our, fellow students who were also eating, kind of a conventional peanut butter. Is that it actually tastes like peanuts, and it tastes really good, and you don't have to do much to it for it to taste good. And that was sort of a revelation, I think, for us at the time.
So you get covered in the newspaper. Are you now thinking, hey, let's keep this, sort of see how far we can take this? Or were you kind of thinking, well, this is just like a weird circumstance, but, business as usual, keep staying in school?
Right. And I think the magic thing about all of this coming together and the fact that we're still running it 5 years later is the balance of our two personalities. Because I'm, like I said, I'm fairly pragmatic. My skill set is, let me build the website. Let me design the label. Let me think about how we would price this and sell it. But never in a million years would I have made peanut butter and thought to myself, the first thing I'm going to do is tell everybody how awesome this peanut butter I made is and share it with all my friends and make a Facebook page. And that's so Erica, 100%. So the fact that I kind of had this skill set to build a business and Erica had the skill set to tell everyone about it and share it, and the enthusiasm, really just those two things were kind of what the engine that drove it forward so quickly. And I think if one half of it had been missing, it might have just been a kind of a rainy day project, and that's it. So
you eventually decide to put school on hold and go after this full time.
Right.
Was that? I'm guessing that was not an easy decision, or were you just so passionate it was like lightning in a bottle?
It was a little bit of both. We worked on it all summer when we didn't have school anyways, and started selling at farmers markets, started to look into how we would launch it into stores. We got a commitment from a local Portland store that they would launch it in all 12 of their locations. So those things kind of built up some momentum. And then ABC's really very popular show, Shark Tank, reached out to us. We had sent them an email, and the producers wanted to bring us on the show, which is, if listeners aren't familiar, it's basically a pitch show format. So you show up with your company and you pitch to these four very wealthy sharks, and they, bicker about, whether or not they want to invest. And it's very, we didn't know anything about business at all. We didn't know any of the answers to any of the questions of the shows that we watched as research. So we just, crammed to get on the show, and the show aired to 10 million households. So from there, it kind of felt like there was no turning back, and we looked at each other and we thought, we can't go back to school this fall. We've got a lot to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I homeschooled until high school growing up. So for me, public education never felt like the end all be all. And I think it was a little more challenging for Erica because her mom's a teacher and she's always been in the public school system. And so it was a little harder to wrap her mind around.
What was that like going on the show? Was it like preparing for a triathlon and you guys were like drilling the whole way up, or did you wing it, or like how did that go?
Once again, different answers for each one of us. She'd say different things than me. She's much more of a flashcards, be prepared kind of person. I'm a little more of a wing it, but combined, it was definitely let's watch every episode of this show that has aired and memorize the answers to the questions and Google what evaluation is and try to decide if we think we have one. So it was very much like, we went in knowing there were 100 questions they could ask us that we would give them nothing but blank stares. And luckily they didn't ask any of those.
Oh, nice. So the actual show, did it go okay? It sounds like it went really well.
Yeah, it did. And ultimately, the best part about the show was that all the sharks loved the taste of the peanut butter, and they all said so on air. So, that means a lot of people go to your website and they order a lot of peanut butter, which was really fun to watch the orders rolling in and then pack them all up ourselves in boxes. But, we didn't end up getting an investment from the show, which honestly, in hindsight, is just the best thing because you're never going to get a good investment on that show. But we got really, really great PR.
Yeah, and so after that, you're like, okay, we can't walk away from this. This is a once in a lifetime thing that you got this massive boost of interest.
Totally.
Yeah, and so so then you guys are both instant yes, like full speed ahead.
Yeah, we'd on the plane ride home. I mean, we'd never in our lives gotten in a plane and been flown to LA, and then so the whole thing was a very surreal experience. And then we're flying back on the flight and looking at each other and just, we can't go back to school. It's probably the most dramatic moment of our company before or since, honestly.
Yeah. And when was that? when were you guys on the show?
That aired in May 2012, but we had filmed it the September prior. So This was right at the end of 2011. So it was really when we had been doing the company for 7 months and decided it was time to hit the gas pedal a little bit.
That's awesome. And then, so since then, how has the business gone?
It's been a crazy journey. All of my 20s so far, and probably most of my 20s will be spent with this company. So I've really kind of grown up alongside of it. And we are now in, 9,000 locations across the country. We sell almost 30 different products in different flavors and package sizes. Our most popular being our chocolate coconut peanut butter, or our vanilla espresso almond butter, or honey sunflower butter. Those are kind of our top 3 products. And we've launched a bunch of new stuff. And
did you say chocolate espresso? Was that
vanilla espresso almond butter? Is that one?
Okay. Whoa. Yeah. Those do sound good.
Yeah, so that was kind of our niche, and now we're expanding. We also sell plain peanut butter and almond butter, and we sell them in single serve packets. With our top account being, Whole Foods and other stores very similar. We're launching in Target in April.
And I forgot to ask, what is the name of the company?
It's called Wild Friends Peanut Butter, and I'm so glad you asked me to say that because I can't believe I went so long and didn't say it. When we first started, it was called Flying Squirrel, and now we're called Wild Friends Nut Butter.
Oh, why the change? Flying Squirrel's kind of quirky, but maybe not.
Well, we had a whole experience, and I could talk forever about trademarking, but suffice it to say that, you have to make sure that you're the only one with your name before you move forward with it. So we went through a few different iterations.
I know that pain. Anthology used to be called Poachable, and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office said no many times. And yes, we could do a whole show on that one.
Yeah, for sure. It wouldn't be very exciting, but it might be helpful.
It might save some people a lot of heartache, but it wouldn't be riveting.
No.
Well, awesome. I want to be careful about time, so I want to pause us for a second and jump over to Peter, and let's talk about your journey. And so you grew up in Portland?
I grew up in Portland, born and raised, 6th generation Portlander, actually, Oregon Trail family, and lived in the same house my whole childhood. And then I left for 5 years and lived in Los Angeles for undergrad and grad school. And then I came right back because I love it here.
So were you tempted to stay down in Southern California with all the sunshine and beautiful people?
I love LA, which a lot of people in Portland, they hate on LA. And the reason they hate on LA is because they go down there for a weekend and they just see like traffic and smog. But it's an amazing city that is one of the most diverse and culturally rich cities in the world. And it takes time to get to know a place, any organism that big. And so I love going back to visit. I'm glad I don't live there because, I'm a big fan of the mountains and more green trees and stuff like that. But I do love LA, and I do miss the sunshine on certain rainy days and the gray Portland winter.
Yes, I know. We've got a little gray in Seattle too right now. Just for another 6 months, we'll be fine.
Exactly.
So you study. It looks like you studied urban planning, city planning at USC.
Yeah, well, it was a bit of a circuitous route, but I actually started at the USC Film School, which is the number one film school in the world.
Yeah.
When I decided to leave the film school with only one semester left before I finished my degree, it was kind of heretical, and the other classmates looked at me like I was crazy. But I realized I was spending all of my time, my free time, not thinking about film, but thinking about public policy. So I actually switched to public policy as an undergraduate, and then I continued at USC for my graduate degree in urban planning.
Were you tempted just to get the few more credits, get that, USC film degree on the resume, and then do the urban planning stuff? Like, why make the change so, just right before you're wrapping it up?
Well, because I would have had to stay an extra semester, and it's 6 months or whatever is a long time to be doing things that you don't want to be doing. So I was, especially at that age, it's like, things are moving fast, and I just saw it as kind of a big opportunity cost to continue sticking with something just for the sake of sticking with it, when really my interest was elsewhere.
Yeah.
My heart wasn't in it.
There are so many people that I've encountered who are interested in film who would want to stab you right now.
I know. Well, it gave me a good base, and actually, I do want to revisit film at some point in my career because I love it. I could see myself maybe merging the two and making an urban planning documentary or something.
That would be cool. I would watch that. So then you decided, okay, urban planning is for me. You end up going and getting a master's in it, and then after that, moving back to Portland. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And so then do you go and plan urban things? Like, what did you do when you came here?
Right, and that's the funny part, is that I didn't even do urban planning. But I did do public policy in a sense, which is I came up to Portland and I went onto a mayoral campaign with a campaign running for mayor back in 2012. And it was actually 2011. The election was 2012. And it was probably the best first job out of school I could have asked for, because first of all, you're put into what is essentially a startup organization. It's a campaign that you're building from the ground up. So you're given huge amounts of responsibility. There's always more to do, so you can take as much initiative as you want, and people will just be happy about it. And so you can really carve out a nice niche for yourself. And then 3, you just meet so many people. I met, besides the people on the campaign, you're out in the city, raising money, raising friends, and you just meet a ton of people that have been valuable as friends and professional connections throughout my career since then.
So did the candidate win?
No, we lost.
Oh.
Which is okay. We were the front runner actually for a lot of the campaign, and then at the end there, we kind of we lost for a variety of reasons that are all pretty speculative. It's hard to kind of boil those things down. But I've done 3 political campaigns total. Plus, I've worked in the legislature, and I am 1-2 on the campaigns. 2 losses, 1 win. But I feel great about the losses, and actually, both the losses are the more memorable, the more fun campaigns. Actually,
it sounds like you were on the path to becoming one of these professional campaign guys.
I was.
Little George Stephanopoulos running around.
I was, and then I looked into the future and saw the guys who were 20 years older than me still doing campaigns, and I decided I don't want to have that kind of life.
Yeah.
So I left.
So was your aspiration prior to that to work on sort of national campaigns too, or were you always focused on stuff going on in the Oregon area?
When I was in the middle of, campaigning, and that was kind of my career path, or at least I thought it would be for a while, then I thought, okay, maybe I'll jump on to a national campaign, a Senate race, or maybe a presidential. And, I played with those ideas, but at the end of the day, it's just like the burnout, such intense, 9 to 12 month jobs with end dates. And then you have to take 3 months off just to fully mentally recover. It wasn't sustainable for me.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that lifestyle just does. It's not great for families and maybe even mental health down the road. So. You have no idea how many people I met who would tell me, "Oh, I used to do campaigns until I had kids, and then it was like I have to stop this." Yeah. So what did you decide to do to get off of that path and onto a different one?
Well, and this is, I've been fairly opportunistic in my kind of approach to my career since school, which is jumping at interesting opportunities as they arise. And I was talking about the connections I made on the campaign. And obviously one of them was with the candidate and her husband, who from that first campaign that I was on. And so after doing politics for a while, I was still very good friends with them, and we were just kind of talking one day at my uncle's political fundraiser, because he was running for school board. But we were chatting, and we were like, hey, we should start a business together because that would be fun. And so we had this whole idea, and it was for a incubator for food startups. And we worked on it for 4 months before we realized it actually wasn't that good of an idea, for a variety of reasons, or at least it wasn't a viable idea in the way we imagined it. But it kind of launched me on this path of being interested in the startup world, and I had always been interested in the food world. Obviously, being with Keeley, I had kind of tangential exposure to that on a daily basis, and that led me to my current job, which I've been at for a year and a half, with Green Zebra Grocery, which is a startup healthy convenience store. Think Whole Foods meets 7-Eleven kind of thing.
You guys have peanut butter there?
We sell Definitely. Wild Friends, among others. But it's actually a fascinating connection, because our CEO, Lisa, she was the CEO of New Seasons Market back when Keeley
Which is
and Erica,
a Portland-based chain. It was the first chain that Wild Friends ever launched in, and then Lisa left to start Green Zebra, and now Peter works there. So it's just kind of a funny random connection.
Yeah. So that was the first thing that you guys got for Wild Friends beyond the farmers markets. That was when you got into the 10 stores.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay. So now, what a small world. So now you're at Green Zebra, Peter. What's that like?
Well, it is fun and fast and a little scary sometimes, because we're a startup and we have one store and we're trying to grow. We're opening our second store in April, our third store this summer, and we're trying to increase access to healthy food. That's our mission. And there's just a lot of obstacles in the way to doing that, because it's hard to make money in the grocery business, because it's such a low margin business, such a high labor business, and there's so much competition. But we have this unique vision that Food should be more convenient. Food should be healthy. And going shopping should be fun. And it should be in every neighborhood. So our stores are small format, only slightly bigger than a 7-Eleven, but we pack a lot of delicious, healthy, fresh food in them.
Well, that sounds awesome. Are you guys going to come up to Seattle anytime soon?
Oh, I would love to come to Seattle. If you know any good spots, please let me know. We're, probably not ready like in 2016, but maybe in 2017. Yes, we actually did a study, and Seattle is under-grocered on a per capita basis compared to Portland. We're spoiled grocery people here in Portland, but...
Did you even know that under-grocered was a word before now?
I did not, but I could see it. Well, partly because our population has grown quite a bit over the last few years, and I haven't seen more grocery stores pop up.
What neighborhood do you think would benefit from a natural food store up in Seattle?
Oh, well, I live on Finney Ridge. There's a lot of young families around us, and there's there's a Safeway, and we go there because it's nearby.
Right.
And then there's Whole Foods, which is great, but it's pretty pricey and it's a little bit of a drive. Mm-hmm. So I think the Seattle vibe is very focused on healthy food and sustainable and local. And so it sounds like what you were talking about is a very good fit for the personas that we have here.
Totally.
Seattle's growing like crazy, mainly because of Amazon's just on fire right now. It has been for forever. So maybe we'll get you I'll be able to buy my Wild Friends peanut butter locally. And whatever the one that had espresso in it, I think I'll be trying first.
Sounds like the perfect storm.
Yeah. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts, both of you now, on what's interesting is you both are in the startup world, but you guys aren't the typical kind of startups that we've had on the show before. Mostly on the show.
You mean we're not tech?
Yes, that's right. That's right. You're not trying to get to 1 billion users, in a month kind of thing. And right. I was kind of curious in terms of when you hear startup and entrepreneurship, it's easy to think about, the social network and Instagram and, all these kind of high flyers from the Valley. And you guys are taking a different approach, perhaps even a more sustainable entrepreneurship approach. And I was just wondering, do you guys ever talk about what kind of startup you guys are? And even between the two of you, you've got Wild Friends, which is, on a tear, gets on national TV and in all these stores. And then you've got Green Zebra getting ready and thinking about the second store to open. Curious what kinds of sort of entrepreneurship conversations you two have.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think that, you bring up a good point, and it I won't say it bothers me, but I wish there was more, content, interview writing out there for folks who are interested in entrepreneurship, but who don't want to do a tech startup and they're not in Silicon Valley. Because, sure, I get some value out of reading all these blogs, all these interviews with all these people in the Valley who are doing these tech startups, but a lot of it doesn't actually correlate to what Keeley and I are doing and the kind of things we're working on. So we definitely talk about that. And we actually happen to be in this community here in Portland where there's a lot of non-tech entrepreneurs around us, people who are starting furniture companies, people who own bakeries, people who...
there's a lot of food startups here too. It actually does, and I would use the word bother. It bothers me that there's not more content online or resources for consumer products startups, which obviously it's hypocritical to say because I'm not online kind of being super transparent about everything that goes on with my company. I think there's just not as much of a culture of sharing and transparency in product and brick and mortar businesses as there are in tech, just because tech inherently is so online focused. So I think that's something that probably will change, especially as consumer products and tech kind of merge. Like these companies, like, I don't know, like online-based marketplaces like Harry's is a shaving company, or Warby Parker glasses that are like making a product but selling it direct to consumer. So I think there's some merging that might make it more transparent. So Peter and I really talk. I mean, we talk a ton about business. I'm loved ever since Peter switched from politics to Green Zebra. It's just been like it's like my favorite career move he's ever made, because now we can talk about grocery all the time, which is great for me. So it's really helpful to have kind of that resource that's thinking about things like how long you have till you run out of money at your business, which you just don't have. I wouldn't have if Peter was working for a big company.
What are some of the things where you two have maybe different worldviews on entrepreneurship? Like clearly there's a lot of commonality, but I'm guessing there's probably topics where you guys have spent hours like kind of picking apart and sort of coming at it from different perspectives. Are there sort of topics that you think are really where you just have a very different view on things, on how to start a business or how to grow it?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, we just have very different businesses. Mine is very friend and family, overlap, because I started it with my friend Erica. Mm-hmm. Early funding came from my family. My dad works for the business. So, Wild Friends, me quitting my job, leaving my job, Wild Friends failing has very different connotations for me than Peter leaving Green Zebra or Green Zebra struggling, just because so much of my personal kind of equity is tied up in it as well. And then, so just coming from that perspective, Peter's taught me a lot about work-life balance. He has a really good sense for work-life balance, in the sense that, a lot of members of his family, who most of them live in Portland, have been entrepreneurial, own their own businesses, are self-employed. They have a really, really great culture of being very present at the office and then turning it off and being very present with family. And that's something Peter's observed growing up, and I haven't as much. My dad just loves to work, loves it, and could work all the time. And I have a little bit of that in me too. So Peter's, always encouraging me to close my laptop and go somewhere for the weekend and get off my work hamster wheel.
Keeley calls it work-life balance, which I think is true to an extent. But for me, it's not even about like you're not working. It's not like you stop working at 5 or you stop working on the weekends, especially when we're in a situation like we are, where, we have so much invested in our companies, both mentally and financially and emotionally. And it's just a different kind of work. And, for me, I found it super effective to, the kind of work that you can do on the evenings and the weekends is the bigger picture stuff, like, developing the slow hunches that you've been thinking about, having a conversation with Keeley that will lead to an insight that, I wouldn't be able to have if I was holed up on my computer.
How often do you guys completely unplug from work, like entirely? Or do you find that at pretty much every moment, you're always thinking about, okay, how do we solve this problem? Or how do we get this thing to grow faster? Or do you guys take timeouts from the kind of working and digital world?
Yeah. It's rare to do that for more than one day in a row for us, but we do it. We'll go on a backpacking trip, or we'll get out of cell phone range for 2 or 3 days at a time every so often, which I love to do. Yeah,
and it definitely goes in seasons. Like right now, Wild Friends is fundraising, or Green Zebra's about to open a new store, or Peter's closing a lease. Like those are times when going on a backpacking trip would induce more stress than it would release, because you're out of range and you've got stuff to do. And then there's some times when you're just really mentally tied up, but not even over any one item on your to-do list. You're just tied up over the whole picture. And that's when Peter and I have found it really is a good time to get out of Dodge and go get out for a weekend, because then you come back with fresh perspective. So I think it's just knowing what season you're in with work. And, Peter and I are pretty cognizant of if we've been working too hard, because ourselves just don't allow us to work nonstop with no breaks. We really need them and appreciate them.
Yeah, I recently started a practice where from it's sort of like a kind of like a digital Sabbath thing where for me it's from Saturday at sunset until Sunday morning sunrise. I won't use my phone, laptop, or even look at a TV. And
Nice.
I cannot. I've been shocked, absolutely shocked, how different it is. And for me, I think I was kind of like addicted to always like checking my email, triaging the email or working on, my Trello board of things to do for the team or whatever. And I have found that when you get away from all screen time, you can kind of like appreciate things at a level like you've never been able, like even like eating a meal. You can actually like taste the food because your other hand's not freaking scrolling through Twitter or reading the news or, tapping out a quick reply to, some sales email.
I know.
Do you
So
guys
sad,
find
so
that?
true.
It's really
Definitely.
sad. Yeah. So I'd love to kind of talk about one of the things that you guys both touched on, which is like a lot of your cells are tied up in your current businesses, and it depends. Like Keeley, you mentioned, since you've started it from a long time ago, and you and the business and your co-founder are kind of like really one and the same in some ways. Do you feel like where does like the fear of failure come into the picture? Is that an issue anymore, or do you feel like, hey, clearly Wild Friends made it quite big, now it's just a question of how big we can get it? Or do you still sometimes feel like the pressure to prove something?
Oh, I mean, I think every day when you make the decision that you want to grow your startup and, you want to grow it to whatever X dollar amount or X size or to an exit to a point where you could find a strategic acquirer, which is what we want to do with Wild Friends. I mean, we see it being eventually acquired by a big company that can make it even bigger because of all the kind of infrastructure that a big company has to grow a food business, from like sales, marketing, production, ingredient sourcing, all that. And we've seen a lot of big natural companies or small natural companies, that is, be acquired and do just that, and, without losing quality. And that's something we aspire to. When you make that decision versus being a lifestyle business, you're accepting that you're going to be in existential crisis until that happens, or maybe even after, all the time, constantly, because you're just always stretching your resources. Everybody's always wearing so many hats. And, we just hired our first employees this year. We ran a business with 4 people, growing it to, around 3 million before we even hired anybody. So you're wearing a lot of hats. You're constantly stretching your cash. So you have nothing in your bank, and you're paying suppliers, when you can. And we've just gone through all of that, trying to get a bank loan, getting a bank loan. I feel like every day is a little bit of a crisis. But to that point, I think that it's both a pro and a con to be running it with your best friend. The con obviously being that the stress of feeling like if it fails, you've let down someone other than yourself, letting down your friends and family. But the huge pro being that the one thing I never worry about is if I'm going to be running the business alone, because I know so that we're both in it till whenever we're not in it. We're both in it together till the point where it makes sense. So that's a huge weight off my shoulders. And I know a lot of people running businesses alone, and it's super hard, and it's extremely taxing emotionally, because there's no one else that can understand the position you're in except for your co-founder. So I've always been really grateful for that. And I highly recommend if people are waffling on whether or not to start a business, that they consider starting it with someone else for that reason. Yeah,
it's way too much for one person to internalize.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, even Peter, I talk to him about the business all the time, and he, is my best friend and, partner, and totally gets it. But he's not also running Wild Friends every day. So it's just, that is like the relationship that I feel like you can be best kind of emotionally understood as your co-founder and when you're in the middle of some sort of crisis. So I just highly recommend it.
I'd love to follow up on, we talked about when you guys are on the plane home from Shark Tank, it was like, okay, let's go for it. Was there a similar conversation as to lifestyle versus, let's try and scale this thing and have a really big exit? Because I could see that not being a no-brainer. A lot of companies say, well, once you go down that path and you want to get big fast, if you don't, you could sort of end up worse off than if you had just sort of like, had a great business that produced a lot of cash and gave you a great lifestyle and you retained control, yada, yada. What was that a hard call?
Honestly, another thing I'd recommend getting a co-founder, and then I'd recommend having, kind of the top 5 conversations about how you see yourselves running it, how you see your lives. We didn't do that at all. I think the beauty of the situation is that we both kind of came to those conclusions without realizing it. We didn't even know that was a conversation you should have because we knew nothing about business whatsoever. We'd never done any research, read any entrepreneurship blogs in our lives. So I would recommend doing that. We didn't. And I think things kind of serendipitously worked out because we've had the same vision, even if we didn't articulate it. But we've also lived together for 5 years, so we have kind of a special, weird friendship bond that not everybody wants or has.
So you guys ended up in the same place, kind of organically saying, let's swing for the fences on this one. It sounds like.
Yeah. And I think, our answer to everything that's ever come our way is, what's the next step? Like, oh, you want us in your stores? Okay. We have no idea how we can get to that point, but let's just do it. Let's commit. Let's say yes. And let's see what happens. And let's, we're always a little behind what we've promised. So we'll promise someone we're going to launch in all their stores. We have no idea if we can do it. We say yes, and then we make it happen. And that's been our attitude even from, the first day of just, let's be in the school paper and we'll tell them that we have a business and we have no idea what we're doing. And that's just always been our attitude. And I think that's shared among a lot of entrepreneurs because the whole thing's just kind of crazy. So you kind of just have to be a little like prepared to be unprepared.
Yeah. Now, Peter, when you made the switch from working on a lot of campaigns in urban planning and very, very makes a lot of sense. And then you jump into Green Zebra, a startup. Like, I'm guessing for you, there's also some pressure for this to be successful because you want to make sure that, this was the right call and that this is a good path you've chosen. How are you feeling about stuff?
There's pressure to be successful, but the pressure for me, like as a non-founder joining an early startup, I was corporate employee number, 2 or 3, depending on how you look at it. Mm-hmm. The pressure for me compared to Keeley is very different because it's actually it's not, for me, it's more of like it's not about money or anything. I'm young enough where I don't feel like whether this results in financial success for me or not isn't that big of a deal at this point in my career. It's more about I feel pressure to add as much value as I possibly can to Green Zebra because if I do that, then A, the company has a better chance of being successful, but B, it'll, I just feel, open up so many more doors and opportunities for the rest of my career. I would feel that way about any job, but really, like, I think the way to do that for someone who's joining a startup not as a founder is to think like a founder. And I do think of myself as an owner of Green Zebra. I think of myself as responsible for the future of the company. And, if I'm not responsible for it, who else is going to be? I mean, obviously, that's what our founder's thinking also. And that's what, all of these early employees should be thinking because we're in this together. So I don't feel a big sense of urgency around it all, or I don't feel the way our founder does, where she's invested all her money and her career capital in this. But it's definitely important that we succeed.
And real quick, I just want to say, as someone who's recently hired employees, that hearing, if the founder of Green Zebra, hearing Peter or anybody you hire say things like that has just got to feel amazing. And, we've had varying success with hires. And when I've hired employees that feel ownership and that are as passionate about something I started as me, it just literally warms my heart so much.
It's not a one-way thing.
Yeah.
I'm not just sure, I may have some predisposition to being that kind of person, but it's really a testament to our CEO, Lisa, and to the culture she's built, where it's not like I'm sitting there like, I want to be an owner. She's literally handing me the responsibility, the autonomy, and she's saying, let's build this together, which, I think any smart leader is going to be doing at this, juncture in history where, people, it's easy for smart, motivated people to go start their own business. So if you want them in your business, you have to, give them ownership.
A piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a two-way street for sure.
What do you think, Peter, has been the biggest lesson you've learned from Keeley's experience about how you're doing your job at Green Zebra?
I would say the biggest thing I've learned from Keeley is I've always been a more analytical kind of person, someone who takes a little more time to deliberate and think. And Keeley has taught me the power of just doing and acting. And then, from there, you'll get feedback, whether it's from your customers or your colleagues or your investors, and then you'll iterate and you'll just keep acting and doing. And I recently read the book about Amazon, the Everything Store, and they have a phrase that they use there called a bias toward action, which reminded me of Keeley and Wild Friends. They've always had a bias toward action. They've always said yes to everything. Yes, let's go into that chain. Yes, let's add that SKU. Yes, let's do that private label. And I think it's been a valuable kind of antidote to my more cerebral, deliberate side, realizing that I need to balance it out, and that acting is thinking. You can actually think better by acting, and you get more feedback by acting often. So I would say that's definitely my number one lesson. Thanks, Keeley.
Keeley, what do you think has been the biggest thing that you've learned from knowing Peter and seeing him?
I mean, it's so, when he says that, it makes me sound so silly to just flip it around. But I do think that there is a synergy there of Peter's made me a much more deliberate thinker, despite all my instincts not to be. In this sense, I think what has been really, really cool perspective that I've gotten from Peter is that he researches everything and learns as much as he can about everything. He'll read every article he can find on something before he forms an opinion. And he is an expert at employing silence to an end, whether it's silence sitting and listening and learning, or it's silence in a conversation with someone and letting them potentially be uncomfortable for a minute or two if Peter is in a negotiation or just doesn't have anything to say and doesn't want to say something just for the sake of saying it. I can be a little bit of a people pleaser, and if I'm in a conversation with an investor or even, our potential landlord, when we were talking to them about our house, they're deliberating over something, and my instinct is to jump in and make them feel comfortable by saying, "Oh, no, it's okay. You don't have to decide right now, or we can talk about it later." And Peter, in complete silence, and just, be very pleasant, but just sit and let them be uncomfortable. And usually it ends up concluding the problem in a way that makes everybody happy because they had the time to be uncomfortable and come to a conclusion. And he doesn't rush things, which I think is what makes him really valuable to Green Zebra, because he's always in these lease negotiations and I think moves them along a little more quickly than a people pleaser might.
Yeah. It's so hard sometimes, I've found personally, to not jump in those pauses, especially in negotiations. And it takes a lot of discipline to do that. So, yeah, that's totally a huge life lesson in many kinds of interactions with other people.
There's a catchphrase in politics, Tom, that when you're asking for money, it's ask, be specific, be quiet.
Oh, I love that.
I think it's a good corollary, not just for politics, but for lots of things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could see that coming in handy for investor meetings, too. You know?
Definitely.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. It's been an amazing conversation. I'm really thrilled that we could kind of feature people on the show, who aren't trying to build an app that gets like 1 billion downloads a year, and that like you guys do real stuff, and
yeah, we make some real stuff. You can eat it.
Yeah.
To be clear, we are looking for 1 billion shoppers by 2020.
Yes, and that's yeah, but not by like next week.
Right, 2020 is a reasonable timeline.
Yeah. Well, Peter Koehler and Keeley Tillotson, thank you so much for sharing your Saturday morning with us. And if people wanted to sort of learn more about what you guys are doing or stay kind of connected, what are some good places that they can check out, on the web?
Well, Wild Friends has a lot of stuff. You can go to wildfriendsfoods.com. We have an Instagram and a Twitter, and you can reach us super easily on either of those. And then, I have a personal Twitter, but I never use it. So you're better off contacting me through anything Wild Friends. It either goes to me or Erica, and we're constantly standing side by side. So it's a pretty easy way.
And Peter?
And you can find Green Zebra at greenzebragrocery.com. Once you're there, you can find links to, our social accounts. And then you can follow me personally at petermk.com, which is where I write, infrequently, depending on the month. But if you're especially interested, you can subscribe so you never have to worry about checking the blog. You just get it in your email inbox.
Love it. We'll include those links in the transcript as well. And have an awesome day, guys.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
We'd love to hear what you think of the Anthology Career Stories podcast. Send us an email anytime at podcast@anthology.co. Send us feedback, nominate a guest, or volunteer to share your own story. If you really want to make our day, please consider giving us a review on iTunes. It helps us spread the word and attract more great guests. The Anthology Career Stories podcast is brought to you by Anthology, an award-winning and discreet career matchmaking platform used by over 50,000 professionals, as well as hundreds of top employers like Amazon, Netflix, Salesforce, Uber, Microsoft, and Dropbox. Learn more at anthology.co and follow us on Twitter @Anthology.